Chapter 45. Percy. Percy felt homesick for the swamp. He never thought he'd miss sleeping in the giant's leather bed in a dragon bone hut in the festering cesspool. But right now that sounded like Celsium. He and Annabeth and Bob stumbled along in the darkness. The air thick and cold, the ground alternating patches of pointy rock and the pools of muck. The terrain seemed to be designed so that Percy could never let his guard down. Even walking 10 feet was exhausting. Percy had started out from the giant's hut feeling strong again, his head clear, his belly full of dragon jerky from their packs of provision. Now his legs were sore. Every muscle ached. He pulled a makeshift tunic of draken leather over his shredded t-shirt, but it did nothing to keep out the chill. His focus narrowed to the ground in front of him. Nothing existed except for that, and Annabeth at his side. Whenever he felt like giving up, plopping himself down and dying, but just like every 10 minutes, he reached over and took her hand just to remember there was warmth in the world. After Annabeth's talk with Damison, Percy was worried about her. Annabeth didn't give into despair easily, but as they walked, she wiped tears from her eyes, trying not to let Percy see. She knew she hated it when her plans didn't work out. She was convinced they needed Damison's help, but the giant had turned them down. Part of Percy was relieved. He was concerned enough about Bob staying on their side once they reached the doors of death. He wasn't sure he wanted a giant as his wingman, even if that giant could cook a mean bowl of stew. He wondered what happened after they left Damison's hut. He hadn't heard the pursuers in hours, but he could sense their hatred, especially Polybrates. The giant was back there somewhere, following, pushing them deeper into Tartarus. Percy tried to think of good things to keep his spirits up the lake at Camp Half-Blood. The time he'd kissed Annabeth underwater. He tried to imagine the two of them and you roam together, walking through the hills and holding hands. But Camp Jupiter and Camp Half-Blood both seemed like dreams. He felt as if only Tartarus existed. This was the real world. Death. This was the real world. Death, darkness, cold and pain. He'd imagined it all the rest. He'd been imagining all the rest. He shivered. No, that was the pit speaking to him, sapping his resolve. He wondered how Nico had survived down here alone, without going insane. That kid had more strength than Percy had given him credit for. The deeper they travelled, the harder it became to stay focused. This place is worse than River Cosia, Percy muttered. Yes, Bob called back happily. Much worse. It means we are close. Close to what? Percy wondered, but he didn't have the strength to ask. He noticed small Bob the cat had hidden himself in Bob's coveralls again. Which reinforced Percy's opinion that the kitten was the smartest one in their group. Annabeth laced her fingers through his. In the light of his bronze sword, her face was beautiful. We're together, she reminded him. We'll get through this. He'd been so worried about lifting her spirits, and here she was reassuring him. Yeah, he agreed. Piece of cake. But next time, she said, I want to go somewhere different on a date. Paris was nice, he recalled. He managed to smile. Months ago, before Percy got amnesia, they'd had dinner in Paris one night, compliments of Hermes. That seemed like another lifetime. I'd settle for New Rome, she offered, as long as you're there with me. Man, Annabeth was awesome. For a moment, Percy actually remembered what it was like to feel happy. He had an amazing girlfriend. They could have a future together. Then the darkness dispersed with a massive sigh, like the last breath of a dying god. In front of them was a clearing, a barren field of dust and stones. In the centre, about 20 yards away, lay the gruesome figure of a woman, her clothes tattered, her limbs emaciated, her skin leathery green. Her head was bent as she sobbed quietly as the sound shattered all Percy's hopes. He realized that life was pointless. His struggles were for nothing. This woman cried, mourning the death of the entire world. "We're here," Bob announced. Achilles help. Chapter 46. If the sobbing gal was Bob's idea of help, Percy was pretty sure he didn't want it. Nevertheless, Bob trudged forward. Percy felt obliged to follow. If nothing else, this area was less dark, not exactly light, but with more of a soupy white fog. "Achilles," Bob called. The creature raised her head, and Percy's stomach screamed, "Help me!" Her body was bad enough. He looked like the victim of a famine. Limbs like sticks, swollen knees and knobby elbow rags for clothes, broken fingernails and toenails. Dust was capped on her skin and piled on her shoulders as if she'd taken a shower at the bottom of a hourglass. Her face was utter with desolation. Her eyes were sunken and rheumy, pouring out tears. Her nose dripped like a waterfall. Her stringy grey hair was matted to her skull in great tufts, and her cheeks were raked and bleeding as if she'd been clawing herself. Percy couldn't stand to meet her eyes, so he lowered his gaze across her knees like an ancient shield, a battered circle of wood and bronze painted with likeness of Achilles herself, holding a shield. So the image seemed to go on forever, smaller and smaller. "That shield," then Miss murmured. "That's his. I thought it was just a story." "Oh no," the old hag wailed. "The shield of Hercules. It painted me on its surface so his enemies would see me in their final moment. The goddess of misery." She coughed so hard it made Percy's chest hurt, as if Hercules knew true misery. "It's not even a good likeness." Percy gulped. When he and his friends had encountered Hercules at the Straits of Gibraltar, it hadn't gone well. The exchange had involved a lot of yelling, death threats, and high velocity pineapples. "What's the shield doing here?" Piper asked. The goddess stared at him with her wet, milky eyes. Her cheeks dripped blood, making red polka dots on her tattered dress. "He doesn't need it any more, does he? It came here when his mortal body was burned. A reminder, I suppose, that no shield is sufficient. In the end, misery overtakes all of you, even Hercules." Percy inched closer to Annabeth. He tried to remember why they were here, but the sense of despair made it difficult to think. Hearing Achilles speak, he no longer found it strange that she had clawed her own cheeks. The goddess radiated pure pain. "Bob," Percy said, "we shouldn't have come here." From somewhere inside Bob's uniform, the skeleton kitten meowed in agreement. The Titan shifted and winced as if small Bob was clawing his armpit. "Achilles controls the death mist," he insisted. "He can hide you." "Hide them?" Achilles made a gurgling sound like he was either laughing or choking to death. "Why would I do that?" They must reach the doors of death," Bob said, "to return to the mortal world." "Impossible," Achilles said. The armies of the Tartarus will find you. They will kill you. Annabeth turned the blade of the Drakenbone sword, which Percy had to admit made her look pretty intimidating and hot. In a barbarian princess kind of way. So I guess your dismissed is pretty useless then, he said. The goddess bared her broken yellow teeth. Useless? Who are you? A daughter of Athena. Annabeth's voice sounded brave, though how she did it, Percy didn't know. It didn't walk halfway across the Tartarus to be told what was impossible by some minor god. The dust quivered at their feet. Frogs swirled around them with a sound of agony, with the sound of agonized wailing. Minor goddess! Achilles' gnarled fingernails dug into Achilles' shield, gouring the metal. I was old before the Titans were born. You ignorant girl. I was old when Gaia woke. Misery, eternal existence is misery. I was born on the eldest ones of chaos and night. I was, yes, and with sadness and misery. Blah, blah, blah. But you still don't have enough power to hide 2 demigods? With your death mist, like I said, useless. Percy cleared his throat. Annabeth? He flashed a warning look. Work with me. He realized how terrified she was, but he had no choice. This was their best shot, stirring the goddess into action. I mean, Annabeth is right, Percy wanted, but brought us all the way because he thought you could help. But I guess you're too busy staring at the shield and crying. Can't blame you. It looks just like you. Achilles wailed and glared at the Titan. Why did you inflict these annoying children on me? Brom made a sound somewhere between a rumble and a whimper. I thought the death mist is not for helping, Achilles shrieked. It shrouds of mortal misery as their souls pass into this of the sparse of death, of despair. It is the very breath as they pass into it shrouds mortals in misery as their souls pass into the underworld. It is the very breath of the Tartarus, of death, of despair. Awesome, Percy said. How could we get 2 orders of that to go? Achilles hissed. Ask me for a more sensible gift. I am also the goddess of poisons. I can give you death. Thousands of ways to die. Less painful than the one you have chosen by marching into the heart of the pit. Around the goddess flowers bloomed in the dust. Dark, purple, orange, and red blossoms that smelled like sickly sweet. Percy's head swarmed. Nightshade, Achilles offered. Hemlock, belladonna. Headbane, streaking. I can dissolve your innards, boil your blood. That's very nice of you, Percy said, but I've had enough poison for one trip. And can you hide us in your death mist or not? Yeah, I'll be fine, Annabeth said. The goddess's eyes narrowed. Fun? Sure, Annabeth promised. If we fail, think how great it'll be for you, gloating over our spirits when we die in agony. You'll get to say, I told you so for eternity. Or if we succeed, Percy added, think of all the suffering you'll bring to the monsters down here. We intend to seal the doors of death. That's going to cause a lot of wailing and moaning. Achilles considered. I enjoy suffering. Wailing is also good. Then it's settled, Percy said. Make us invisible. Achilles struggled to her feet. The shield of Hercules rolled away and wobbled to a stop in a patch of poison flowers. It is not so simple, the goddess said. The death mist comes at the moment you are closest to your end. Your eyes will be clouded only then. The world will fade. Percy's mouth felt dry. Okay, but we'll be shrouded from the monsters. Oh yes, Achilles said. If you survive the process, you'll be able to pass unnoticed among the armies of the Tartarus. It is hopeless, of course, But if you're determined, then come. I'll show you the way. Way to where exactly? Annabeth asked. The goddess was already shuffling into the gloom. Percy turned to look at Bob, but the Titan was gone. How did 10-foot-tall silver dude with a loud kitten disappear? Hey, Percy yelled to Achilles, where's our friend? He cannot take this path, the goddess called back. He is not mortal. Come, little fools. Come experience the death mist. Annabeth exhaled and grabbed his hand. Well, how bad can it be? The question was so ridiculous, Percy laughed, even though it hurt his lungs. Yeah, next day, though, dinner in New Rome. They followed the goddess's dusty footprints through the poison flowers deeper into the fog. Chapter 47. Percy. Percy missed Bob. He'd got used to having the Titan on his side, lighting their way with his silver hair and his fearsome war broom. Wow, a broom can be used for war. Or a fearsome war broom. Now their only guide was an emaciated corpse lady with serious self-esteem issues. As they struggled across the dusty plain, the fog became so thick that Percy had to resist the urge to swat it away with his hands. The only reason he was able to follow Achilles' path was because of the poison plants sprung up everywhere wherever she walked. If they were still on the body of the Taurus, Percy figured they must be on the bottom of his foot. A rough, casual exposure where only the most disgusting plant life grew. Finally, they arrived at the end of the big toe. At least that's what it looked like to Percy. The fog disappeared, and they found themselves on a pencil that jutted out over a pitch black void. Here we are. Achilles turned and leered at them. Blood from her cheeks dripped on her dress. Her silky eyes looked moist and swollen, but somehow excited. Can misery look excited? Great, Percy asked. Where is here? The verge of final death, Achilles said, where night meets the void below Tartarus. Annabeth inched forward and peered over the cliff. I thought there was nothing below Tartarus. Oh, certainly there is, Annabeth coughed. Even Tartarus had to rise from somewhere. This is the edge of the earliest darkness, which is my mother. Below lies the realm of chaos, my father. Here, you are closer to nothingness than any mortal has ever been. Can you not feel it? Percy knew what she meant. The void seemed to be pulling here at him, leaching the breath from his lungs and the oxygen from his blood. He looked at Annabeth and saw that her lips were tinged blue. We can't stay here, he said. No, indeed, Achilles said. Don't you feel the death mist? Even now you pass between. Look. White smoke gathered around Percy's feet as if it coiled up his legs. He realized the smoke wasn't surrounding him. It was coming from him. His whole body was dissolving. He held up his hands and found they were fuzzy and indistinctive. He couldn't even tell how many fingers he had. Hopefully still 10. He turned to Annabeth and stopped to yelp. He couldn't say it. She looked dead. Her skin was sallow, her eye sockets dark and sunken. Her beautiful hair had dried into a skein of cobwebs. She looked like she'd been stuck in a cool, dark maelstrom for decades, slowly withering into a desiccated husk. When she turned to look at him, her features momentarily blurred into mist. Percy's blood moved like sap in his veins. For years he had worried about Annabeth dying. When you're a demigod, that goes with territory. Most half-bloods don't live long. You always knew that the next monster you fought could be your last. But seeing Annabeth like this was too painful. He'd rather stand in the rear of Flutterthumb or get attacked by an owl or be trampled by giants. Oh God, Annabeth sobbed. Percy, the way you look. Percy studied his arms. All he saw were blobs of white mist. But he guessed that to Annabeth. He looked like a corpse. He took a few steps, though it was difficult. His body felt insubstantial, like he was made of helium and cotton candy. I've I've looked better, he decided. Can't move very well, but I'm all right. Achilles clucked. Oh, you're definitely not all right. Percy frowned. But we'll pass unseen now. We can get to the doors of death. Well, perhaps you could, the goddess said, if you lived long, which you won't. Achilles spread her gnarled fingers. More plants bloomed along the edge of the pit. Hemlock nightshade and oleander spreading her up towards Percy feel like a deadly carpet. Death mist is not simple a disguise, you see. It is a state of being. I cannot bring you this gift unless death follows true death. It's a trap, Annabeth said. The goddess cackled. Didn't you expect me to betray you? Yes, Annabeth and Percy said together. But then it was hardly a trap. More of an inevitability. Misery is inevitable. Pain is, yeah, Percy growled. Let's get to the fighting. He drew riptide, but the blade was made of smoke. When he slashed at Achilles, the sword just floated across like a gentle breeze. The goddess's ruined mouth split into a grin. Did I forget to mention? You are only mist now, a shadow before death. Perhaps if you had time, you could learn to control your new form. But you do not have me. Since you cannot touch me, I fear any fight with misery will be quite one-sided. Her fingernails grew into talons, her claws unhinged, and her yellow teeth elongated into fangs. Chapter 48, Percy. Achilles lunged at Percy, and for a split second he thought, well, hey, I'm just smoke. She can't touch me, right? He imagined the fates up in Olympus laughing at his wistful thinking. Lol, noob. The goddess clawed raked across his chest and stung like boiling water. Percy stumbled backwards, but he wasn't used to being smoky. His legs moved too slowly. His arms felt like tissue paper. In desperation, he threw his back at her, thinking maybe it would turn to solid when it left his hand. But no such luck. It fell with a soft thud. Achilles snarled, crouching to spring. She would have bitten Percy's face off it. Annabeth had charged and screamed, "Hey!" right in one of the goddess's ear. And Achilles flinched, turning towards the sound. He lashed out at Annabeth, but Annabeth was better at moving than Percy. Maybe she wasn't feeling as smoky, or maybe she just had more combat training. She'd been at Camp Half-Blood since she was 7. Probably she'd had classes Percy never got. She had classes Percy never got, like how to fight while particularly made of smoke. Annabeth dived straight between the goddess's legs and somersaulted to her feet. Achilles turned and attacked her, but Annabeth dodged again like a matador. Percy was so stunned he lost a few precious seconds. He stared at corpse. Annabeth, shrouded in mist, but moving as fast as confidently as ever. Then it occurred to him why she was doing this. To buy them time, which meant Percy needed to help. He thought ferociously, trying to come up with a way to defeat misery. How could he fight when he couldn't touch anything? On Achilles' third attack, Annabeth wasn't so lucky. She tried to veer aside, but the goddess grabbed Annabeth's wrist and pulled her hard, sending her sprawling. Before the goddess could pounce, Percy advanced, yelling and waving his sword. He still felt about as solid as Kleenex, but his anger seemed to help him move faster. "Hey, Happy!" he yelled. Achilles spun, dropping Annabeth's arm. "Happy?" he demanded. "Yeah!" He ducked and she swiped his head at... He ducked as she swiped at his head. "You're downright cheerful." "Ah!" She lunged again, but she was off balance. Percy sidestepped and backed away, leading the goddess further from Annabeth. "Pleasant," he called. "Delightful." The goddess snarled and winced. She stumbled after Percy, Each compliment seemed to hit her like sand in the face. "I will kill you slowly," he growled, her eyes and nose watering, blood dripping from her cheeks. "I will cut you into pieces as a sacrifice tonight." Annabeth struggled to her feet. She started riffling through her pack, no doubt looking for something that might help. Percy wanted to give her more time. He was a brains, better for him to get attacked while she came up with a brilliant plan. "Cuddly," Percy yelled. "Fuzzy, warm and huggable." Achilles made a growling, choking noise like a cat having a seizure. "A slow death," she screamed. "A death from 1,000 poisons." All around her, poison plants grew and burst like overfilled balloons. Green and white sap trickled out, collecting into pools, and began flowing across the ground towards Percy. The smelling fumes made his head feel wobbly. "Percy!" Annabeth's voice sounded far away. Hey, Miss Wonderful Cheerful Grins, over here." But the goddess of misery was now fixated on Percy. He tried to retreat again. Unfortunately, the poison Inca was flowing all around him now, making the ground, steam, and the air burn. Percy found himself stuck on an island of dust, not much bigger than a shield. A few yards away, his backpack smoked and dissolved into a puddle of goo. Percy had nowhere to go. He fell to one knee. He wanted to tell Annabeth to run, but he couldn't speak. His throat was as dry as dead leaves. He wished there was water in Tartarus, some nice pool he could jump into to heal himself, or maybe a river he could control. He'd settle for a bottle of Elion. "You will feel the eternal darkness," Achilles said. "You will die in the arms of night." His eyes dim. He was dimly aware of Annabeth shouting, throwing random pieces of dragon jerky at the goddess. The white-green poison kept pooling like streams trickling from the plants as the venomous lake around him grew wider and wider. Lake, he thought. Streams, water. It was just his brain getting fried from poison fumes. But he croaked out a laugh. Poison was liquid. If it moved like water, it must be particularly water. He remembered some science lecture about the human's body being mostly water. He remembered extracting water from Jason's lungs back in Rome. If he could control that, then why not other liquids? It was a crazy idea. Poseidon was the god of the sea, not of every liquid everywhere. And again, Tartarus had his own rules. Fire was drinkable. The ground was the body of a dark god. The air was acid, and demigods could be turned into smoky corpse. So why not? He had nothing left to lose. He glared at the poison flood, and crouching from all sides, he concentrated so hard that something inside him cracked, as if crystal water shattered in his stomach. Warmth flowed through him. The poison tide stopped. The fumes blew away from him, back towards the goddess. The lake of poison rolled towards her in tiny waves of rivulets. Achilles shrieked. "What is this?" "Poison." "Poison," Percy said. "That's your speciality, right?" He stood, his anger growing hotter in his gut, as the flood of venom rolled towards the goddess. The fumes began to make her cough. Her eyes watered even more. "Oh, good," Percy thought. "More water." Percy imagined her nose and throat filling with her own tears. Achilles gagged. The tide of venom reached her feet, sizzling like droplets on hot iron. She wailed and stumbled back. "Percy!" Annabeth called. She'd retreated to the edge of the cliff, even though the thought poison wasn't after her. She sounded terrified. It took Percy a moment to realize she was terrified of him. "Stop!" she pleaded, her voice hoarse. He didn't want to stop. He wanted to choke this goddess. He wanted to watch her drown in her own poison. He wanted to see how much misery could take. "Percy, please!" Annabeth was still pale and corpse-like, but her eyes were the same as always, The angry wish in them made Percy's anger fade. He turned to the goddess. He willed the poison to recede, creating a small path of retreat along the edge of the cliff. Leave, he bellowed. From an imitated goal, Achilles could run pretty fast when she wanted to. She scrambled along the path, fell on her face, and got up again, wailing as she sped into the dark. As soon as she was gone, the pools of poison evaporated. The plants withered to dust and blew away. Annabeth stumbled towards him. She looked like a corpse wreathed in smoke, but she felt solid enough when she gripped his arms. Percy, please don't ever. Her voice broke into a sob. Some things aren't meant to be controlled, please. His whole body tingled with power, but the anger was subsiding. The broken glass inside him was beginning to smooth out the edges. Yeah, he said. Yeah, okay. We have to get away from this cliff, Annabeth said. If Achilles brought us here as some kind of sacrifice? Percy tried to think. He was getting used to moving with the death mist around him. He felt more solid, more like himself, but his mind still felt stifled. With cotton wool. She said something about feeding us tonight, he remembered. What was that about? The temperature dropped. The abyss before them seemed to exhale. Percy grabbed Annabeth and backed away from the edge, and the presence emerged from the void. A form so vast and shadowy, he felt like he understood the concept of dark for the first time. I imagine, said the darkness in a feminine voice, as soft as coffin line, that she meant night with a capital N. After all, I am the only one.